Arizona Territory, 1885. Willow Mackenzie stood alone at the grave, her black mourning dress catching the desert wind as she tried to heft the shovel deeper into the unyielding earth. The weight of the ornate wooden box tucked under her arm felt heavier than its modest size would suggest. At 22, she had already buried more loved ones than most twice her age, yet this task seemed the most impossible of all. "No one should have to do this alone, ma'am." The voice startled her. She hadn't heard anyone approach over the whistling wind that swept across the vast plains surrounding the small town of Promise Creek. Willow turned, wiping a strand of honey-blonde hair from her face, leaving a smudge of dirt across her delicate features. There stood a cowboy, hat in hand, respectfully distant but close enough that she could make out the concern in his clear blue eyes. He couldn't have been more than 25, with sun-bronzed skin stretched over high cheekbones and a jawline that suggested both strength and gentleness. His light stubble caught the afternoon sun, and despite her grief, she noticed how it complemented his sandy brown hair. "I'm perfectly capable," Willow replied, returning to her digging with renewed vigor, "and I prefer to be alone." The young man nodded, replacing his hat. "Nathan Lawson, ma'am. I work the Morgan Ranch to the east." "Didn't mean to disturb your business." Something in his voice, genuine concern without pity, made her pause. Willow had spent 3 years in Promise Creek, convinced that entangling herself with anyone would only lead to more heartbreak. The frontier had taught her that lesson repeatedly, her parents on the wagon train west, her uncle last winter, and now, she glanced down at the box. "It's not a person," she said finally, not entirely sure why she was explaining herself to a stranger. "Just memories that need burying." Nathan nodded, his eyes lingering on the ornate carvings of the wooden box. "Sometimes those weigh heavier than bodies." The simple truth of his words struck her. For a moment they stood in silence, the wind the only sound between them. "The ground's hard here," he observed, gesturing to the shallow impression she'd managed to create. "Spring hasn't softened it much. I could help if you'd allow it." "Why would you help a stranger?" Willow asked, her voice carrying the edge that had kept most of Promise Creek at a distance. "Because no one should face hard ground alone," Nathan replied simply. "Not when there's another shovel available." Willow hesitated. Her instinct was to refuse, to maintain the careful distance she kept from everyone in town. Connections meant vulnerability, and vulnerability inevitably led to pain, but her arms ached and the sun was beginning its westward descent. "I have only one shovel," she said, half hoping it would end the conversation. Nathan smiled, a gentle, reassuring expression. "Fortunately, I never ride without tools." He gestured toward his horse, where indeed a shovel was secured to his saddle. Something about his straightforward offer, devoid of the curious glances and whispered speculations she'd endured since arriving in town, broke through her resistance. "Very well, Mr. Lawson." "Nathan," he corrected gently, retrieving his shovel. They worked in companionable silence, the rhythmic sound of metal cutting earth filling the space between them. The hole gradually deepened under their combined efforts. "That should be enough," Willow said finally, stepping back from the rectangular pit. She clutched the box tighter, suddenly reluctant to complete the task she'd set out to accomplish. Nathan sensed her hesitation. "Would you like a moment alone, miss?" "Mackenzie, Willow Mackenzie," she swallowed hard, "and no. You've earned the right to stay, I suppose." She knelt beside the hole, the black fabric of her dress pooling around her. With trembling hands, she positioned the box at the edge of the pit, preparing to slide it in when the latch gave way. The box tumbled open as it fell, spilling its contents into the freshly dug earth. Dozens of letters bound with faded ribbons scattered across the ground. Willow gasped, lunging forward to gather them, but the wind caught several pages, sending them dancing across the prairie. "I'll get them," Nathan called, already running after the wind-blown papers. Panic seized Willow as she scrambled to collect the letters and return them to their container. These were her most private possessions, the reason she'd come to bury them in the first place. No one was meant to read them, no one was meant to know. Nathan returned, a handful of letters clutched carefully in his weathered hands. His expression had changed, and Willow knew instantly that he'd seen something on those pages, something private. "I didn't mean to read them," he said softly, holding out the recovered letters. "But I couldn't help seeing the first few lines of this one." Willow snatched the papers from his hand. "It's not your concern, Mr. Lawson." The handwriting, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "It's familiar somehow." Cold dread washed over her. Impossible, you couldn't know the writer. The letter spoke of Whispering Canyon and the old mining settlement there. His eyes, searching her face, held no judgment, only curiosity. My father worked those mines before they collapsed in '79. Willow felt the blood drain from her face. The Whispering Canyon disaster had claimed 37 lives, including her father, and apparently Nathan's as well. The coincidence seemed too great, too cruel. These letters were never meant to be read by anyone, she said firmly, gathering the last of the scattered papers, least of all a stranger. Nathan nodded, respecting her privacy despite the questions clearly burning in his eyes. He helped her collect the remaining letters without another word about their contents. When they had recovered them all, he stood back, allowing her the space to repack the box. But Willow found herself frozen, staring at the top letter, the one Nathan had glimpsed. Her father's handwriting stared back at her, the ink faded but still legible, "My dearest Margaret. The Whispering Canyon yields more than silver. Yesterday, Lawrence's boy spotted a new vein that might change everything for us. If our suspicions prove correct, we'll have enough to bring you and little Willow west by Christmas." "I should go," Nathan said softly, breaking the silence. Willow looked up, suddenly aware she'd been lost in the words. "Yes, perhaps you should." He tipped his hat respectfully. "If you ever need anything, Miss Mackenzie, the Morgan Ranch is just past the East Creek. Anyone can point the way." As he turned to leave, Willow felt a strange panic rise in her chest. For 3 years, she'd maintained careful distance from everyone in Promise Creek, convinced that attachments only led to loss. Yet something about this cowboy, perhaps the shared thread of the Whispering Canyon tragedy, made her call out, "Mr. Lawson, Nathan." He paused, turning back to her. "Thank you for your help today." She hesitated, the words unfamiliar on her tongue. "I appreciate it." His smile was gentle, understanding. "Like I said, no one should face hard ground alone." As she watched him ride away, Willow looked down at the box in her hands. The impulse that had driven her here, to bury her past once and for all, suddenly seemed hollow. These letters were all she had left of her family, of a life before grief and loneliness became her only companions. With careful movements, she secured the box and stood, leaving the empty grave behind her. Perhaps some memories weren't meant to be buried after all. The following morning, Willow opened her small dress shop to find Nathan Lawson waiting outside, hat in hand and uncertainty in his eyes. "I apologize for the intrusion, Miss Mackenzie," he said as she unlocked the door. "But I couldn't stop thinking about those letters, about Whispering Canyon." Willow tensed. "As I said yesterday, they're private matters." "Of course," he nodded, following her into the shop when she reluctantly gestured him inside. "But my father was Samuel Lawson. He was the foreman at the Whispering Canyon mine." The name hit her like a physical blow. Samuel Lawson had featured prominently in her father's letters, a fair boss, a good friend. "Your father wrote often about mine," Nathan continued softly. "They were friends, weren't they?" Willow turned away, busying herself with straightening spools of thread that needed no straightening. "Yes. From what I understand, they were." "I never got to know my father properly," Nathan said, his voice taking on a distance that spoke of old pain. "He sent most of his earnings back east to my mother and me. I was 14 when the mine collapsed." Despite herself, Willow felt a stirring of connection. "I was 19. My mother and I were preparing to join my father here when we received word of the accident." The shop fell silent as they both remembered. Outside, Promise Creek was coming to life, merchants opening their stores, women gathering for morning gossip, children running to school. Life continuing as it always did, oblivious to old wounds reopened. "I came west 2 years ago to understand the man my father was," Nathan finally said. "Found work with old Morgan, learned the land, but I never found anyone who really knew my father, not until yesterday." Willow met his gaze then, recognizing the same hunger for connection that she'd suppressed for years. "The letters wouldn't tell you much," she said, gentler now, "just fragments. Even fragments are more than I have now." His blue eyes held no demand, only hope. "I understand if you refuse, but I'd consider it a kindness if you'd allow me to read what your father wrote about mine." Against her better judgment, against the walls she'd built to protect herself from precisely this kind of entanglement, Willow found herself nodding. "Come by after I close the shop, 6 o'clock. The relief and gratitude in his smile stirred something she'd thought long dead. When evening came, Willow found herself arranging and rearranging the few pieces of furniture in her small rooms above the dress shop. The box of letters sat on her table, no longer destined for burial but still heavy with memory. Nathan arrived precisely at 6, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. A trade, he explained, placing it on the table. My father kept a journal, not much, he wasn't one for writing, but there might be mentions of your father. The simple gesture of reciprocity touched her. They sat across from each other at her small table, the two containers of memory between them, and began a careful excavation of their shared past. As darkness fell outside, Willow lit lamps and they continued reading, occasionally sharing passages aloud. Their fathers emerged from the yellowed pages as vivid characters, hardworking men with dreams for their families, unlikely friends united by the harsh realities of frontier mining. Listen to this, Willow said, her voice soft with wonder as she read from one of her father's letters. Samuel's boy back east is apparently quite the artist. He showed me a drawing the lad sent, a perfect rendition of their family home. Samuel says the boy has his mother's eye but his determination. He carries that drawing everywhere, proud as any father could be. Nathan's expression transformed, a mixture of surprise and deep emotion. He kept my drawings, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I never knew. He mentioned them often, it seems, Willow replied, shuffling through several letters. Your father spoke of you constantly. The revelation seemed to settle something in Nathan. He reached for his father's journal, turning to a page he'd marked earlier. May I? At Willow's nod, he read, Mackenzie's little girl is heading west with her mother come winter. He talks of nothing else these days. Says she has quite the talent with a needle and thread, made her mother's entire traveling outfit herself. The man's bursting with pride over it. Warmth bloomed in Willow's chest at this echo from the past. Her father's pride carried across years and tragedy to reach her now, through the son of his friend. I never made it west while he was alive, she said softly. My mother died of influenza the year after we received word of the mine collapse. I came alone 3 years ago. Thought I might find some connection to him here. Did you? Nathan asked. Willow gestured to the box. Only what's in these letters. No one in town remembered him. Most folks here now came after the mine disaster. So we're both looking for ghosts, Nathan observed. I was, Willow corrected him. Yesterday I decided to stop. That's why I was burying the letters. Nathan's brow furrowed. Why would you bury your only connection to him? Willow stood, moving to the window where she could look out at the darkened street of Promise Creek. Because holding on hurts too much. Everyone I've ever loved has been taken from me. These letters, they're a reminder of all I've lost. Or all you've had, Nathan suggested gently. Some folks never have what you describe in these letters. A father who adored you, a mother who taught you your craft. Willow turned back to him, suddenly seeing this cowboy in a different light. Not just a handsome face or a chance encounter, but someone who understood loss as intimately as she did. Someone who had walked a similar path. I've been alone since I arrived here, she admitted. Kept everyone at arm's length, convinced that caring for anyone would only lead to more grief. And has it worked? Nathan asked, his question gentle but direct. Has keeping everyone away lessened the pain of what you've already lost? The truth hit her with unexpected force. No, she whispered, I'm just empty. They stayed talking long into the night, reading more letters, sharing memories both painful and precious. When Nathan finally rose to leave, something had shifted between them, a connection forged through shared history and mutual understanding. May I call on you properly, Miss Mackenzie? He asked at her door, hat in hand and hope in his eyes. For the first time in years, Willow felt no impulse to retreat, to protect herself from possible pain. I would like that very much, Mr. Lawson. Spring bloomed across the Arizona territory, and with it, something new flourished between Nathan and Willow. Their courtship progressed through Sunday walks after church, shared meals, and long conversations that often returned to the letters and journal that had brought them together. Nathan introduced Willow to the Morgan Ranch, where she discovered an unexpected affinity for the open country that had claimed her father's life but also given him purpose. In turn, Willow shared her dress shop with Nathan, teaching him about the business she'd built from nothing but determination and skill. As April turned to May, Nathan arrived at Willow's shop one afternoon with unusual seriousness in his bearing. I need to show you something, he said, helping her lock up the shop. Can you ride out with me tomorrow? It's a fair distance. Curiosity piqued, Willow agreed, and the following day found them riding east past the Morgan Ranch, into rougher country that gradually rose toward distant mountains. "Where are we going?" Willow asked as they stopped to rest the horses beside a small creek. Nathan pointed toward a canyon entrance visible in the distance, Whispering Canyon. Willow felt her heart stutter. "The mine, but I thought." "Not the main mine," Nathan clarified. "That entrance collapsed in the disaster. But there's something there I discovered last month that I think you should see." They continued their journey in thoughtful silence, the landscape growing more rugged as they approached the canyon. When they finally reached the entrance, Willow was struck by the eerie beauty of the place. High sandstone walls that caught the wind in such a way that it created a constant, gentle whisper. "Is that how it got its name?" she asked, her voice hushed. Nathan nodded. "The local tribes believed the canyon held spirits. The early miners were more practical, said it was just the wind, but kept the name anyway." He led her along a narrow trail that skirted the main canyon, eventually bringing them to a small plateau overlooking the valley below. There, partially hidden by scrub brush, stood a simple wooden cross. "After the collapse, they couldn't recover all the bodies," Nathan explained softly. "The company put up a memorial in town, but the miners who survived, they made this place a proper miners' cemetery." Willow approached slowly, her heart in her throat. There were nearly 24 crosses, each bearing a crudely carved name. She found her father's almost immediately, the sight of Willow Mackenzie etched in weathered wood bringing tears to her eyes. Beside it stood another cross, Samuel Lawson. "They were found together," Nathan said, coming to stand beside her. "According to the survivors, your father and mine were trying to shore up a weakening support beam when the first collapse happened. They were trying to save everyone." Willow knelt between the two crosses, placing a hand on each. "They died as they lived together." Nathan knelt beside her. "When I found this place last month, I realized something. Our fathers would have wanted us to know each other. They would have made sure of it had they lived." Willow looked at him, this man who had entered her life by chance, or perhaps by something more intentional. "Do you think they somehow arranged this?" "Our meeting?" Nathan smiled, taking her hand. "I think some connections are too strong to be broken, even by death. Our fathers were friends. Maybe that friendship reached across years to bring us together." As they sat together in that quiet place, surrounded by the whispers of the canyon, Willow felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The burden of solitude she'd carried for so long seemed lighter somehow, shared with someone who understood. When they finally mounted their horses to return to Promise Creek, Willow turned back for one last look at the crosses standing side by side against the vast Arizona sky. "I won't bury those letters," she said with quiet certainty. "They're not just reminders of what I lost, they're proof of what was real." Nathan reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "Some things are meant to be remembered, not buried." The ride back to town passed in comfortable conversation, their shared experience at the canyon deepening the bond between them. As they approached Promise Creek in the fading light, however, they noticed unusual activity, people gathered in the street, a tension in the air. "Something's happened," Nathan said, urging his horse forward. Sheriff Cooper intercepted them as they rode into town. "Miss Mackenzie, good you're back. There's been a break-in at your shop." Willow's hand flew to her mouth. "Was anything taken?" "Hard to say, ma'am. Place is torn apart pretty good. You'll need to check your inventory." Nathan helped her dismount, his hands steady at her waist. "I'll come with you." The sight of her shop made Willow gasp. Fabrics were strewn across the floor, furniture overturned, her careful arrangements destroyed. She moved through the chaos in shock, trying to assess the damage. "My strongbox is untouched," she noted with relief, finding the small safe where she kept her earnings still secure behind a panel in the floor. "But why would someone do this if not for money?" "Miss Mackenzie," called a voice from upstairs. Deputy Finch appeared at the top of the stairs leading to her living quarters. "You'd better come see this." With Nathan close behind, Willow ascended to her rooms and found similar destruction, but with a clear purpose. Her father's box of letters lay open on the floor, its contents scattered. Several letters were missing entirely. They were looking for something specific, Nathan observed, helping her gather the remaining letters. Willow's hands trembled as she sorted through what remained. "But what could anyone want with my father's letters?" Sheriff Cooper joined them, notebook in hand. "Any idea what was in the missing letters? Anything valuable mentioned?" A memory flickered in Willow's mind. Her father's words in the letter Nathan had glimpsed that first day. "The Whispering Canyon yields more than silver, Yesterday, Lawrence's boy spotted a new vein that might change everything for us. Nathan, she said slowly, do you remember the letter you first saw? About the new vein they found. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Your father thought they'd found something valuable, something beyond silver. Sheriff Cooper's interest sharpened. Gold. I don't know, Willow admitted. He never specified in the letters I read, but that particular letter is missing now. Along with several others, Nathan added, surveying the scattered pages. Someone thinks these letters contain information worth stealing. Question is who knew about them, the sheriff mused. Willow and Nathan exchanged glances, both realizing the same thing. They had discussed the letters freely in town over the past weeks, never considering that someone might be listening with more than casual interest. We need to find those letters, Nathan said with quiet determination. If there's something valuable mentioned in them, it belongs to Willow and to the families of the miners who died. Sheriff Cooper nodded. I'll ask around town, see if anyone noticed strangers or unusual activity. In the meantime, Miss Mackenzie, you might consider staying elsewhere until we catch whoever did this. She can stay at the ranch, Nathan offered immediately. Mrs. Morgan would welcome the company, and it's secure. The idea of leaving her home rankled, but Willow looked around at the destruction and nodded reluctantly. Just for a night or two, until things are settled. After packing a few essentials and securing her shop as best they could, Nathan escorted Willow to the Morgan ranch, where the elderly couple who owned it welcomed her with genuine warmth. Mrs. Morgan, a motherly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, showed her to a comfortable guest room. Nathan's told us all about you, dear, she said, helping Willow settle in, about your dress shop and your talent with a needle. And about your father's connection to his. He has, Willow asked, surprised by how much Nathan had shared. Mrs. Morgan smiled. That boy's been different these past weeks, happier. Whatever you've brought into his life, it's been a blessing. The simple observation warmed Willow despite the turmoil of the day. She had been so focused on protecting herself from potential pain that she'd never considered what joy she might bring to someone else's life, or what joy they might bring to hers. Later that evening, after a hearty dinner with the Morgans, Nathan walked with Willow in the ranch yard under a vast canopy of stars. What do we do now? She asked, her thoughts returning to the missing letters. Whoever took them obviously thinks they lead to something valuable. Nathan considered this, his expression thoughtful in the moonlight. We need to determine what your father might have discovered. The letter mentioned Lawrence's boy spotting the new vein, if we could identify Lawrence. Wait, Willow said suddenly, there was something in your father's journal, something about a Lawrence Jenkins. Nathan nodded slowly, you're right. Pa mentioned him several times. He was one of the miners who survived the collapse. If he's still alive. He might know what they found, Nathan finished, and why someone would steal letters about it 6 years later. Do you know if he's still in the territory? Nathan's face lit with realization. Last I heard, Jenkins settled in Copper Springs about 30 miles north. He's got a small claim there. They looked at each other, a plan forming between them without words needed. We'll ride out tomorrow, Nathan said decisively. Find Jenkins, learn what he knows. Willow nodded, but hesitation crept into her voice. Whoever broke into my shop might be dangerous. What if they're willing to do worse than property damage to find what they're looking for? Nathan took her hands in his expression serious in the starlight. I won't let anything happen to you, Willow. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her, a place that had been closed off since she'd lost her parents. For years, Willow had convinced herself that depending on anyone was foolish, that true safety came only from isolation. Yet standing there with Nathan, she felt safer than she had in years. Together, she echoed softly, allowing herself to lean into him just slightly. His arm came around her shoulders, protective and gentle. Above them, the stars of the Arizona night blazed in silent witness to a wall coming down, a heart cautiously opening. The journey to Copper Springs took most of the following day. They left at dawn, riding north through increasingly mountainous terrain, the May sun warm on their backs. Nathan had insisted on bringing his rifle, secured in a scabbard on his saddle, a precaution that Willow found both worrying and reassuring. Copper Springs proved to be little more than a cluster of buildings serving the surrounding mining claims, a general store, a saloon, and a handful of crude cabins. The townsfolk directed them to Lawrence Jenkins's claim, a small operation on a hillside east of town. They found Jenkins himself working his sluice box, a wiry man in his 50s with a thick gray beard and the permanent stoop of someone who'd spent decades underground. He straightened as they approached, suspicion evident in his weathered face. "Whatever you're selling, I ain't buying," he called, reaching for a shotgun propped against a nearby tree. Nathan raised his hands placatingly. "Not selling anything, mister." "Jenkins, my name's Nathan Lawson, Samuel Lawson's son." The name registered immediately. Jenkins lowered the shotgun, squinting at Nathan, "Sam's boy from back east." "Yes, sir, and this is Miss Willow Mackenzie. Edward Mackenzie's daughter." Jenkins set the shotgun down entirely, removing his hat as he approached them. "Well, I'll be damned. Eddie Mac's little girl, he talked about you constantly." He studied her face. "Got his eyes, you do." The simple observation brought unexpected tears to Willow's eyes. So few people remembered her father now, and fewer still could see him in her. "Thank you," she managed, "Mr. Jenkins, we need to ask you about something that happened just before the mine collapse." Jenkins's expression darkened. "Why dredge all that up now?" Nathan explained about the break-in, the stolen letters, and their suspicions about what might have been discovered in the mine. As he spoke, Jenkins's face grew increasingly troubled. "You'd better come inside," he said finally, gesturing toward a small cabin nearby. Inside, Jenkins poured them each a cup of coffee before settling heavily into a chair across from them. "Your fathers were good men," he began. "Best I ever worked with. What I'm about to tell you, well, they meant it to benefit everyone, not just themselves." Willow leaned forward. "What did they find, Mr. Jenkins?" "Gold," he said simply. "Not just any gold, a vein richer than anything seen in the territory, different from the usual deposits. It was my boy who spotted it first. He was 16 then, working his first season in the mines." "The letter mentioned Lawrence's boy," Nathan confirmed. Jenkins nodded. "That's right. Tommy noticed something unusual in the rock face, a different color, a different texture. He showed your father," he said, looking at Willow, "and Eddie brought in Sam to examine it." "But the mine was primarily silver," Nathan said, confused. "Wouldn't the company have pursued a gold vein immediately?" "That's just it," Jenkins continued, his voice dropping lower. "The company didn't know. Your fathers decided to keep it quiet until they could file their own claim." Willow frowned. "That doesn't sound like something my father would do." "It wasn't theft," Jenkins clarified quickly. "The Whispering Canyon Mining Company had rights to the silver deposits, but their claim didn't cover new discoveries of different minerals. It was a common loophole back then. Your fathers planned to file a proper claim, then negotiate with the company for fair extraction rights. But the mine collapsed before they could," Nathan concluded. 2 days before," Jenkins confirmed grimly. They'd drawn up a map showing the exact location of the vein and were planning to ride to the territorial office that weekend. Only 3 people knew the precise location, your fathers and me. "And the map?" Willow asked, already suspecting the answer. "Lost in the collapse, at least I thought it was." Jenkins looked troubled. "Your father kept meticulous notes, Miss Mackenzie, if he described the location in those letters." "Then whoever stole them might be trying to find the gold," Nathan finished. Jenkins nodded solemnly. "A vein that rich, worth killing for to some." The implications settled heavily between them. What had begun as a personal violation, the ransacking of Willow's home, now took on darker dimensions. "Mr. Jenkins," Nathan said carefully, "do you remember where this vein was located?" The old miner shook his head. "General area, yes. Exact spot, no. That's why they made the map. The entrance we used then is collapsed anyway. You'd need to find another way in, if you were foolish enough to try." As they prepared to leave, Jenkins pulled Willow aside. "Your father was proud of you, girl, kept a daguerreotype of you in his pocket watch. Showed it to anyone who'd look." His weathered face softened with memory. "Said you were the reason he worked so hard to build something worthy of you." The words lodged in Willow's heart, a treasure more valuable than any gold vein. "Thank you," she whispered. As they mounted their horses for the return journey, Willow noticed Nathan's thoughtful expression. "What is it?" she asked. "I'm trying to figure out who might have known about these letters and about their potential value." Willow considered this. "We've discussed them quite openly these past weeks. Anyone in Promise Creek could have overheard. But to know their significance, to connect your father's letters to a hidden gold vein," Nathan shook his head. That requires more specific knowledge. They rode in contemplative silence until Willow suddenly reined her horse to a stop. Nathan, what if it wasn't someone who overheard us? What if it was someone who already knew? What do you mean? The Whispering Canyon Mining Company. They own the mine where our fathers died. What if they've suspected all these years that something was discovered just before the collapse? What if they've been waiting for evidence to surface? Nathan's expression grew grave. And when we started openly discussing your father's letters, it might have triggered something, Willow finished. But who would represent the company now? The mine's been closed for years. Marshall Webb, Nathan said suddenly. He was the company's lawyer back then. Now he's the territory's circuit judge. He still handles legal matters for what remains of the company's assets. The pieces began falling into place. Judge Webb had been in Promise Creek just last month for the quarterly court session. He could easily have heard about the letters and their potential significance. We need to get back to town, Nathan said urgently. If Webb's behind this, he has resources we don't. They pushed their horses harder on the return journey, reaching the Morgan Ranch well after dark. Mr. Morgan met them in the yard, his expression troubled. Glad you're back, he said, helping Willow dismount. Sheriff Cooper was here looking for you. There's been trouble in town. What happened? Nathan asked, dread evident in his voice. Someone tried to burn down Miss Mackenzie's shop last night. Sheriff caught the fellow in the act, one of Judge Webb's clerks. Young man won't talk, but they found some of the missing letters on him. Willow gasped, the news hitting her like a physical blow. My shop, is it? Damage to the back room only, Mr. Morgan assured her. Sheriff's men got there quick, but Cooper says this goes deeper than he thought. He wants to see both of you in the morning. That night, Willow barely slept, her mind racing with all they'd learned. The discovery of gold, her father's secret plans, Judge Webb's possible involvement, it was almost too much to process. But beneath the turmoil ran a steadier current, the knowledge that she wasn't facing this alone. Morning brought Sheriff Cooper to the ranch, his expression grave as he joined them for breakfast. Webb's clerk isn't talking, but we found something interesting in those recovered letters, he explained, spreading papers on the table. Look here, your father included a coded message. Appears to be directions. Willow examined the letter, noticing for the first time how certain words were underlined in an almost imperceptible pattern. How did you spot this? Wasn't me, Cooper admitted. My deputy's father was a telegrapher. Boy has an eye for codes. Nathan leaned closer, studying the pattern. Can you decipher it? Already did. Cooper handed them a separate page with a simple message. North wall. 500 feet from main shaft. Look for the crossed timbers. 3 feet beyond, heaven awaits. It's directions to the gold vein, Willow realized. Cooper nodded grimly. And Judge Webb is organizing a survey party to examine the old mine site. Claims it's for historical documentation. They leave tomorrow. He's going after the gold, Nathan said. Using his position as judge to make it look legitimate. And who's going to question a territorial judge, Cooper added, especially one who technically represents the old mining company's interests. Nathan's jaw set in determination. We have to get there first. That's dangerous territory, Cooper warned. Mine's unstable. That's assuming you could even find another entrance since the main shaft collapsed. Mr. Jenkins mentioned another way in, Willow said, meeting Nathan's gaze with equal resolve. A prospector's tunnel that bypasses the collapse. Cooper studied them both, clearly weighing his official duties against his sense of justice. Webb's using his position to steal what rightfully belongs to the miners' families, he said finally, including yours. I can't officially sanction what you're planning, but, he hesitated, I might be too busy to notice you leaving town today. With the sheriff's tacit blessing, they prepared quickly. Mrs. Morgan packed them provisions while Nathan gathered equipment they might need, ropes, lanterns, tools. By noon, they were ready to depart. This is dangerous, Nathan said quietly as they secured their supplies. The mine could be completely unstable after all these years. Willow nodded, understanding the risks. This isn't just about gold, Nathan. It's about our fathers, about the truth of what happened. I need to know. Nathan's expression softened as he looked at her. In the weeks since their chance meeting at the grave site, something profound had grown between them, a connection that went beyond their shared history. Together then, he said, taking her hand. Together, she affirmed. The journey to Whispering Canyon took them along a different route than before, a rougher trail that Jenkins had described, leading to the western edge of the canyon where a prospector's tunnel allegedly provided alternative access to the mine workings. They reached the location by late afternoon, finding a narrow opening half hidden by brush and debris. It looked hardly large enough for a person to enter, but Jenkins had assured them it widened once past the entrance. "Ladies first," Nathan joked weakly, trying to lighten the moment. Willow attempted a smile, appreciating his effort. "I believe the gentleman leads the way in treacherous situations." After securing their horses, they prepared to enter the tunnel. Nathan lit a lantern, its glow casting long shadows across the canyon wall. "Stay close," he instructed, ducking into the opening. The tunnel was indeed narrow at first, requiring them to proceed single file, crouching to avoid the low ceiling. The air grew cooler, damper, with each step deeper into the mountain. After nearly 15 minutes of careful progress, the passage widened enough for them to walk upright, side by side. "Jenkins said this tunnel should intersect with the mine's northern galleries," Nathan said, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "If your father's directions are accurate, we should find the location from there." The tunnel continued to descend, occasionally branching. They followed Jenkins's instructions, taking the left fork at the first junction, then right at the second. Eventually, they reached a rough wooden door, the boundary between the prospector's tunnel and the commercial mine. Nathan tested it cautiously. The wood was rotted, giving way easily under pressure. Beyond lay the mine proper, timbered walls, rail tracks for ore carts, the remnants of a more organized operation. "We're in," Willow whispered, a mixture of triumph and trepidation in her voice. They consulted the coded directions again. The north wall 500 feet from the main shaft, but which way was the main shaft? "This way," Nathan decided, pointing to where the rail tracks led. The tracks would converge at the main shaft for ore removal. They followed the tracks, moving carefully through sections where support timbers had warped or partially collapsed. The sense of walking through a place where their fathers had lived and died was overwhelming. Every shadow seemed to hold echoes of the past. After what seemed an eternity, they reached a massive pile of debris, the collapse that had claimed 37 lives, including their fathers. They stood in silence for a moment, the reality of the disaster viscerally present in the tons of rock and shattered timber before them. "The north wall would be that way," Nathan said finally, pointing to their right. 500 feet from here." They began counting their steps, moving along the north wall of the gallery, lantern light flickering across the rock face. At approximately 500 feet, they began searching for the crossed timbers mentioned in the code. There, Willow spotted them first, two support beams that had been deliberately arranged to form an X against the wall. The surrounding area looked unremarkable, just another section of mine wall, indistinguishable from the rest. Nathan examined the wall carefully, running his hands across the rock surface. 3 feet beyond, the message said. He measured 3 feet from the crossed timbers and began tapping the wall, listening for hollowness or variation in the sound. On his third attempt, a different note resonated, a higher pitch suggesting a cavity beyond. "This is it," he said, excitement building in his voice. "Hand me the pickaxe." With careful, measured strokes, Nathan began chipping away at the wall. The rock gave way surprisingly easily, revealing a narrow opening that had been deliberately sealed. A few more minutes of work enlarged the hole enough for them to peer inside. Willow gasped as Nathan directed the lantern light into the opening. A small chamber lay beyond, and within it, a vein of ore unlike anything they had seen in the rest of the mine. Even in the dim lantern light, it glittered with unmistakable richness, gold intermingled with quartz in a vein nearly 6 inches wide. "Heaven awaits," Willow whispered, quoting the coded message. "Your father wasn't exaggerating," Nathan said in awe. "This could be the richest strike in the territory." As they stood absorbing the magnitude of their discovery, a voice behind them shattered the moment. "I believe you've found what I've been looking for." They whirled to find Judge Marshall Webb standing in the tunnel, flanked by 2 armed men. The judge was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, impeccably dressed despite their subterranean surroundings. His expression combined triumph and cold calculation. "Judge Webb," Nathan acknowledged, moving instinctively to place himself between Willow and the newcomers. "Mr. Lawson, Miss Mackenzie," Webb nodded cordially, as if they were meeting at a social function rather than hundreds of feet underground. "I must commend your detective work. Saved my men considerable effort." "This doesn't belong to you," Willow said, her voice stronger than she felt. Our fathers discovered it. They were planning to file a legal claim. Webb's smile never reached his eyes. Without documentation, I'm afraid that's merely hearsay. The Whispering Canyon Mining Company retains mineral rights to this entire area. Not for gold, Nathan countered. Their claim specified silver only. A technicality that a territorial judge is uniquely positioned to interpret, Webb replied smoothly. Now, I suggest you both step aside. Nathan stood his ground. And if we refuse? Webb sighed as if disappointed by Nathan's predictable response. These are dangerous, unstable tunnels. Accidents happen. Two young people overcome by bad air or caught in a small collapse. A tragedy, but not unprecedented in these parts. The threat hung in the air between them, made more chilling by Webb's matter-of-fact delivery. Willow felt fear course through her, but alongside it rose a determination born of her father's memory. He had died trying to do right by his fellow miners. She would not dishonor that legacy by surrendering to intimidation. My father's letters prove their intentions, she said firmly. The coded message, the witnesses like Lawrence Jenkins, there's enough evidence to challenge you, even with your position. Evidence requires living people to present it, Webb remarked coldly. Nathan tensed, clearly calculating their chances against two armed men in the confined space. Before he could act, however, a new voice echoed down the tunnel. That's quite enough, Marshal. Sheriff Cooper emerged from the darkness behind Webb, his deputy and two other men with him. All were armed, their weapons trained on Webb and his companions. Cooper, Webb acknowledged, his composure slipping for the first time. This is a legal survey of company property. You have no jurisdiction here. Threatening the lives of citizens is hardly legal, Cooper replied, and I have jurisdiction over crimes committed in my county, regardless of location. He nodded to his men, who moved forward to disarm Webb's companions. How did you find us? Willow asked, relief washing over her. Cooper smiled. Wasn't hard to figure where you were headed, thought you might need some backup given Webb's resources. He turned serious as he addressed the judge. Marshal, you've overplayed your hand. Using your position to pursue private gain, attempted theft, conspiracy, threats against citizens, the territorial governor will be most interested. Webb's aristocratic features hardened. You're a small-town sheriff challenging a territorial judge. Consider the consequences carefully. I'm considering justice, Cooper replied simply, something you seem to have forgotten about. As Webb and his men were led away, Willow and Nathan remained by the hidden chamber, the golden vein glittering in their lantern light. What happens now, Willow asked softly, to the gold? Nathan considered this. Legally, I believe it belongs to our father's estates, which means to us, but your father's original intention was to share it with all the miners' families, wasn't it? Willow nodded, remembering Jenkins's words about her father. He believed everyone who worked the mine deserved a share of its wealth. Then that's what we'll do, Nathan said decisively. File the claim properly, then establish a trust for all the families who lost someone in the collapse. It's what they would have wanted. Standing there in the flickering lantern light, surrounded by the legacy of their father's discovery, Willow felt a sense of completion, of circles closing. What began with an attempted burial of the past had led instead to its redemption. Nathan took her hand, his expression serious yet tender. Willow, these past weeks have shown me something I never expected to find when I came west. Not gold or silver, but something far more precious. Her heart quickened at his words, at the warmth of his hand enclosing hers. What's that? She asked softly. A future, he said simply. A reason to build something lasting. With you, if you'll have me. In that moment, surrounded by stone and shadow, Willow understood that the frontier was not just a place of loss and hardship, as she'd believed for so long. It could also be a place of new beginnings, of connections stronger than the walls she'd built around her heart. I will, she whispered, stepping into his embrace. Their kiss, there in the depths of Whispering Canyon, sealed a promise that had perhaps begun years before, when two friends worked side by side, dreaming of better lives for their children. 1 year later, Willow Lawson stood on the porch of their newly completed home, watching as Nathan directed the final placement of the sign over the front gate. Whispering Canyon Ranch. The past 12 months had transformed both their lives. The gold claim had been properly filed and verified, with a trust established for the families of all miners lost in the collapse. Judge Webb faced justice for his crimes, his position and reputation destroyed by his own greed. With their portion of the proceeds, Nathan and Willow had purchased land bordering the Morgan Ranch, building a home that combined the best of both their dreams. Spacious enough for the family they hoped to create, with a dedicated workspace where Willow continued her dressmaking business. Perfect, Nathan declared, stepping back to admire the sign. He joined Willow on the porch, his arm slipping naturally around her waist as they surveyed their new kingdom. It feels right, Willow agreed, leaning into his embrace. Using the canyon's name, honoring where it all began. And where it all came together, Nathan added, pressing a kiss to her temple. Inside their home, carefully preserved in a glass case in their parlor, rested the wooden box that Willow had once tried to bury. No longer a painful reminder of loss, it had become a treasury of connection, to their past, to each other, and to the future they were building together. On warm evenings, they would sometimes read the letters aloud to each other, finding new details, new threads connecting their father's lives. The box that had once symbolized Willow's isolation had become, instead, the foundation of their shared history. Sometimes I wonder, Willow mused as they watched the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of gold and amber, what would have happened if you hadn't been writing by that day? If you hadn't stopped to help a stubborn woman trying to bury her past alone? Nathan smiled, remembering the determined young woman with dirt on her cheek and grief in her eyes. Some things are meant to be, I think. Like our fathers working side by side, like us finding each other despite everything. Like love on the frontier, Willow added softly, surviving against all odds. As darkness fell across the Arizona territory, they remained on their porch, surrounded by the whispers of the canyon that had claimed their fathers but ultimately brought them together. The wooden box of letters, once nearly buried in solitude, had become the unlikely beginning of a story that would continue long beyond the fading frontier, proof that even in the harshest landscapes, love could take root and flourish.